you must solve, the hat continued, a series of 10 clues. The last one will make the rest make sense, and you, as a group, must do as it commands. The first team to solve all 10 clues will be transported back to me and may claim 500 points for their team. That'll be us, declared Julian, trying not to look too smug to the other 3 houses' competitors. Fraser Blewett, who appeared to have heard, turned sharply and scowled menacingly at Julian. Severus Snape, who had noticed, stepped between them, blocking the eye line. As the first clue operated in the circle amongst the 4 brooms, not one of them had chosen not to use a broom, Septimus noted. His non-wizard best friend slid onto the seat behind him. I just don't know if my spell's going to work, muttered Rufus to them, as Darren's retreating figure shortened as he made his way to the east entrance of the Quidditch Stadium. Our plan hangs on Doriel, and she can't take virtual messages. Just then, as the Sorting Hat recited the verse it had originally spoken before the first group had gone, Sam Potter stepped forward, shaking each of their hands in turn. Good luck, guys, he said, then, leaning down towards Rufus, whispered something in his ear. Septimus watched as their friend's eyes widened and he turned his head to Sam, mouthing the word, "Really?" To which Sam nodded, and grinned. What was that? Hissed Septimus as the hat's poem was coming to an end. The answer, he whispered back, and winked at Julian. Let's hope so, chuckled back Julian, or all this will have been a waste of time. Oi, what are you doing? Gotta come with you, said Rufus, I need to get to the clues. The broom's going to be awfully heavy, cautioned Septimus, who trusted Rufus, he who had this planned out. Can't I get off and let you fly? Not if I'm upside down, replied Rufus. And Julian's needed as our non-wizard. Plus, it's your broom. He leaned towards them both, tapping his nose knowingly. Speed, he concluded, is not the answer today. It would help, began Julian sardonically, but before either he or Septimus could ask further questions the hat had got away, which it boomed all around the stadium to thunderous applause. Before them, the other 3 teams had flown high, up to the level of the first clue and, as expected, their ascent was slow. The clue would only be revealed once they were all together, although Septimus was ignoring the looks of scorn from the other house teams. Continents move quicker, snarled Neil Fletcher of the usually affable Hufflepuff, and Septimus nodded, acknowledging the keenness and competitive will to begin in the other students, as intense and bright as their own. As they reached the clue, it began to unfold, its contents being revealed to the teams and, like the first, to the audience. The voice of the Sorting Hat, from out of the clue as it slowly unfolded, boomed around a hushed arena. The more you have of it, the less you see. The more you have of it, the less you see? Repeated Septimus, frowning. The clues for the first teams were not riddles, they were objects, words that rhymed. He was awful at riddles. Septimus turned to Julian in despair. The more you have of it, the less you see? He questioned. Julian shook his head, frowning. No idea, he said. More of something that gets rid of light? What do you think of it, then, Rufus? He asked, as Septimus flew to a less prominent position, carefully as there were 3 people aloft, but Rufus was urging them to go back. But before Rufus could answer, Julian broke in, his voice urgent. It's darkness, of course. He shout-whispered to them both. I need to capture the message, Rufus replied, withdrawing his wand. Septimus didn't argue. Clearly Rufus had a plan. He whistled, a small pip-pip, shrill call that they both recognized as Rufus beckoned Doriel. At the same time he raised his wand. Antiphatus, he declared, just as the virtual scroll of paper upon which the clue was written seemed to be curling at the edges. The Hufflepuff team seemed to be edging closer too, and Septimus begged him to hurry up. What's he doing? asked Julian, as he too watched Rufus. The clues are portkeys. If you guess them right, they transport you to the next one. We don't care about that because Darren found out about Edgestone magic. We just have to get the clues to him and place the clues equally around the perimeter of the Edgestones, and the stones will do the rest. Darren will send back Doriel to me, like we practiced. Genius, he added, before declaring, Geminia. And he thinks Darren's the genius, thought Septimus, in wonder, thanking the stars that they gave this strange boy a chance to be their friend, to discover how his view of the world did make sense, more than sense, from Rufus's perspective. The Geminia spell, not the curse that Septimus had been expecting, made a copy of the clue in parchment and, at the same time, Doriel had perched onto the broom tail, making it heavier, ever so slightly. "What is he doing?" wondered James Potter aloud, as a collective gasp of breath from the audience followed Rufus's swinging himself upside down from the handle, Julian holding for dear life onto his belt as he issued instructions to Doriel. "Go. Stones." The tiny puffball hovered just below him, allowing Rufus to slip the message into the pouch on her leg and tie it together. "Go. Stones," he repeated, a little louder and more staccatoed. With the TWT Doriel was off, scampering, if her hurried, fluttering wake could be described as such. What now, thought Septimus as he watched Julian help up Rufus, as they hovered still by the first clue, its image now frozen by the spell that Rufus had cast. He was about to ask Rufus what he'd done, how he'd known to do it could wait until they'd finished, when there was an indignant shout from just behind them. Natalie Huff, the Hufflepuff leader, was frowning crossly at them, her hands on her hips. "Here. You can't change the clue. We need to." "Portus." Rufus changed the clue back to as it had originally been, then whispered to Septimus to touch it, thinking the word darkness, which Julian had discerned from the riddle. At once, the broom began to spin. Trying to resist the urge to yell, Septimus gripped his broom's handle, feeling Julian grip his robes tightly. They finally stopped spinning just outside the north wall, still in the castle grounds, the second clue, as the first, hanging just in front of them. "Okay, what's happening? This hunt is different to the first one." "It doesn't matter," replied Rufus, smiling at them both. "The framework is still the same. We can still follow the method. Just so glad you're some good at riddles, Rocky, else we'd be stuck back there." "Why are we here, though?" asked Septimus, the second clue just before them. He was about to move the lightning shot closer, but Rufus urged him to stay back. "Just for a minute, while I explain. The clues are portks." "Yes, you said," interrupted Julian, impatiently. "And will transport us to the next clue. So," he concluded, as both of his teammates remained silent, waiting for it, "the first was darkness, and we get brought to the darkest part of the course, to the second clue. So, the clues are taking us around, to different places," summarized Septimus, "and their location depends on the clue. And the 10 clues will make up something at the end, which we don't have to worry about because as long as Darren does his bit, the Edgestones will work out what the words mean." "And your spell makes the clues real? Solid?" asked Julian, trying to keep up. "And make a copy, Geminia? Like Gemini, the twins?" "Exactly. You can see why the whole plan was a washout if we couldn't get the actual clues to Daz," nodded Rufus. "Yes, I see. And why we don't need to go fast to deliver the clues," added Septimus, noting the return of his little Doriel, who had inexplicably found them where the second clue was positioned. "Right, we have a game to win, boys," declared Rufus, looking at the second clue. "Go on, September, get really close, and we'll hear the second riddle. As soon as you know the answer, Julian, shout it out and I'll get the copy off to Daz with Doriel." The second clue, What is round, but not always around? Its light is dark sometimes, and everyone wants to walk all over it. Was easily solved by Julian, and they were transported high into the arena the third time, just below the waning moon. Each time a team solved a clue, the crowd cheered, especially if the clue was near the arena itself. And they cheered, as Septimus and his friends had done, when the teams zoomed around, darting hither and thither, enacting their plans, sometimes with their owls, rats, cats and other creatures, sometimes by flying. Sometimes, like the Hufflepuff team, with a compass, clipboard and copious notes and drawings of the land contours. Much good will it do them. It's not to scale, Julian commented loudly as they zipped by on their clean sweep, as the lightning shot ambled towards the west tower in pursuit of Clue 6. As they homed in on Clue 9, having been dropped port like 10 feet from it, a broom rushed past them, Gaudy Springs gripping the broom, his hair flying out behind, not unlike a dog who had discovered the pleasure of the car open window and sticking its head out of it. "Apparato!" commanded Arella, as she waved her wand. "Leviosa!" She tried. Septimus, unnerved by the sudden intrusion of another team, they had been ahead so far, stared at them. "Just go," urged Julian, trying not to look at their opponents. "It's not our fault they haven't found the correct spell." "But if we go, they will hear the riddle," frowned Septimus. "And if we don't, September, and they figure it out their way, they'll be ahead," Rufus reasoned. "Better to draw on this one, than lose. Besides, it's not like we're telling them the answer." "I'm with Rufus," Julian added. "Come Monday, September." Without a second more wondering, Septimus leaned forward, willing the overburdened lightning shot on. It dragged itself forward, Septimus trying not to look at their Ravenclaws out of embarrassment. "We're here," insisted Ro, who was on her own broom, next to Arella. "Wait your turn." "This is a competition, Williams, not a bread queue," shot back Julian, trying not to catch Arella's eye. "You can't," Ro insisted, but was hushed as the clue spoke itself loudly in the hat's voice to them all. "A man builds a house, all four sides facing south. A bear walks past the house. What color is the bear?" Septimus pulled the broom back in retreat, as slowly and embarrassing as their advance. "What do you suppose the color is?" he asked, his voice hushed. "All four sides facing south." "Facing south," wondered Julian, and Septimus tried not to feel concerned as the Ravenclaw started off. "White," declared Rufus, as Doriel timed her entrance perfectly. "The house is at the North Pole." With that, he tipped forward on the broom, having frozen the clue and copied it, before fixing it to the little owl's leg, his hair hanging down as if ringlets, Doriel trying not to get caught up in it as she took flight under instruction. "But they've gone before us," huffed Julian, dejectedly. "We won't get to the last clue before them." "We might," reasoned Rufus thoughtfully. "They disappeared off before I used the Antipatus spell. They don't know the clues are portks. They are having to look for things that are white from scratch," finished Julian, laughing. "In fact, I bet that none of the teams have figured it, how slow we are." "Then you'd better turn the last one back, Ruf," declared Septimus, hovering close to the clue. "Portus." The clue returned to its image again, curling a little and flapping in the cold, damp evening air. Septimus put his hand upon it and, as he did so, the broom swirled round and round as they were transported, this time, to the center of the Quidditch pitch again, just above Madame Lestrange. A cheer erupted from the crowd, which was hushed quickly as Septimus Snape declared their return. Septimus looked down at the white circle that indicated the center of the pitch. "First back," he intoned, but still the 10th clue to solve. Without waiting for a second invitation, Septimus forced the lightning shot up to the clue, slowly and encumbered with their weight. "Antipatus." If you have it, you want to share it. If you share it, you don't have it. What could that be? Wondered Septimus. He was so glad Julian was with them. He was really very good. And Rufus too. He looked at them. Their faces were blank. Time passed, and to Septimus it felt as if the seconds were being sliced away like a knife on a cucumber. If you have it, you want to share it. Doriel appeared, and flapped excitedly, but exhausted, onto the broom tail, resting momentarily. If you share it, you don't have it. Just then, appearing in the sky were both Ravenclaw and Slytherin teams. It seemed as if they both had figured the 9th clue and had guessed the white it meant, which was probably obvious given the 10th clue was always to be revealed here. If you have it, you want to share it. A secret! Shouted out Rufus, too late, as Ravenclaw and Slytherin descended. And then at once, copied the clue. Doriel zoomed off. Thank you, moron! Shouted down Gareth Goyle, shouting over to their second broomed team to quit their large owl from flying up to the owlery where clearly one of their team had been residing. But they don't know what it all means, Septimus told himself, and we have Darren. We have Darren and the Edgestones, and... Just then, a blinding light crackled momentarily around the arena. Light shot out in a dozen directions, lines converging to a point just above them. He'd done it. Darren had explained the Edgestone's magic but, until he'd witnessed it, Septimus hadn't anticipated its intensity and vastness, beaming 50 feet high, unmistakably connecting the edges of the school grounds in its entirety. That's not allowed, using the Edgestones, protested Ro Williams, hotly. You can't do. But her words were drowned out as the words, from all 10 clues, were declared by Darren, who had indeed used the Edgestone's magic to organize them and make them understandable. Darkness falls and the white moon shines down its secrets. Septimus felt fantastic. Despite everything, all they'd done, they'd managed to pull it off. He grabbed Julian, and then Rufus too, clapping them on their backs and shaking their hands as Darren jogged in, his hat askew as he held on to his wand, his face expectantly. His desperate question was answered by the headmaster, underneath the cone he had helped to create held aloft his wand. The cheering, and in pockets, grumbling crowd lulled to silence. And the winning team is, declared the Sorting Hat silkily, for the second round of the lower hunt is ... Gryffindor. And with such a display of teamwork, ingenuity and lateral thinking, they take with them a well-deserved 500 points. The cheats. Histro, as she got off the broom from behind Arella. Don't think I didn't see your head boy tell you something. And she stalked off after her team. 88,888,888. Thanks Mum, nodded Rufus, who sat on the floor with the first Gryffindor team, earphones probably into it, sliding onto the floor, his knees bent. Following their victory and the third group's lower hunt there was an intermission and, true to her word Bellatrix Lestrange, after heartily congratulating her only son by taking him in her arms and burying him, only his curly hair sticking out above her arm. The rest of the boys were congratulated too, and she then allowed Rufus to have her portable pensieve back, making him promise to only listen to his music. Now, nodding his head to the tracks he had composed himself from the vibrations of the natural world, plants, rocks, even air pressure, Rufus was back in his own world. The stadium was being set up for the first semi-final match that would decide one of the finalists in the next day's games, and each house was tense. It was very close, and the teams were divided by a mere handful of points. It was predicted to be a Hufflepuff, Gryffindor final, but, who could tell? After Ravenclaw's growing displeasure at Septimus's team's victory, he supposed that their Quidditch team would take no prisoners. In contrast, the Slytherin, Hufflepuff match would see the bold Snakes play the tenacious Badgers, the latter of whom were favorites, versatile that they were to their opposition. Mr. and Mrs. Scott had come back down to congratulate the boys, and behind them Petunia Dursley, who hugged Darren and introduced herself to the Scotts, hitting it off right away with Mrs. Scott as they discussed recipes and sewing. Before they returned to the stands, as the 5-minute call before the match was to begin, she took Septimus to one side and told him that she had spoken to his mum that week, that Cecilia was well and that she will be on her way home soon. Christmas, Petunia Black had whispered just before she had headed back towards the parents' stands. It'll be over for her by Christmas and she can come home. Christmas, thought Septimus happily. He had had a brilliant afternoon, as brilliant as it could be without his parents. And if his mum was coming home for good. He smiled up to the commentary box where he knew that Cleus would have been watching and then waved enthusiastically. Just before the Ravenclaw and Gryffindor teams take their positions on the fields, Severus Snape announced, from the box this time, rather than on the field, "Can we have all of the lower hunt winning team leaders up for a lap of honor?" "That's us," nodded Septimus, crossing over to the Gryffindor stand where he had left his broom. Doriel, who had gone to sleep on the broomtail, was now not there and, presumably, now it was dark, had decided to roost back in the owlery. "No, just you," replied Julian, as he saw Arella leave her parents and make her way down the steps. "You're better off forgetting about her and her weird anti-conjurists, Rocky, seeing as you'll be going home with the non-wizards tomorrow," advised Darren, clapping him in on his back. "Arella?" Julian looked at his friend, and shook his head. "She's nice, and all," he began as Darren gave him a "don't give me that look." "Anyway, Mum and Dad said I could stay, if I wanted. Now I'm well, or come back at least. If the headmaster was determined that all of the non-wizards needed to leave. They know how to treat me if I get ill again and, well, I'm just loving it here." They were just over the talking to the McGonagall and told her. "That's brilliant." Septimus grinned at his friend. He had had a sinking feeling in his chest all week knowing that Julian would have to leave. Could the day get any better? "Get going." Sam Potter was near them, and pointed to the arena. "With that brilliant display, you don't want to be letting your house down now, do you, September?" Septimus shook his head, looped his leg over the stick part of his broom and leaned flat, the ease of takeoff markedly easily compared to having 2 passengers as he had had during the hunt. He looked down at the arena, easily looking down now at the mass of faces looking up, less nervous as he had been, more comfortable, even enjoying the experience now, in contrast to an hour before. Just below him he saw Sam, who waved as he swooped past. Then he decided to show everyone what the sleek racehorse of a broom the lightning shot was, and he bent low, sleek and streamlined across the broom handle, tucking his calves, ankles and feet at the bristles. The crowd applauded. Darren and Julian cheered and whooped as he went past, the astonishing speed and versatility of the world's fastest broom on display for all to see. And now, the winners, a lap on their own. At once, 6 of the brooms dropped to the ground, leaving just Septimus, Ian Briggs of Slytherin and Katie Pitcher of Ravenclaw in the air. Again, Septimus flew fast, nimbly dodging the other 2 as the crowd cheered. And then it died suddenly. Septimus slowed, looking down as Sam Potter ran onto the field below, and approaching him Fraser blew it. It looked as if they were heading towards one another. By their strides and speed, it didn't look good. Both of their wands were aloft. Septimus felt sure he could hear the word, cheat, being shouted. He slowed further as Sam raised his wand. "Will the head boys of Gryffindor and Slytherin leave the field?" Jack O'Brien, the commentator for the Quidditch match, announced over the tannoy, but the announcement was put to a premature end as Sam Potter turned, his arm raised to the pumpkin loudspeaker, making it explode furiously. "What ho, James? Mick. In the stands, Sirius got to his feet. Is he supposed to be doing that? Fraser Blewett, his eyes fixed on Septimus, watched as the boy hovered just below. All three of the students were still. Cheat. Septimus could read Fraser's silent word, and he guessed that Ro Williams had told him what she suspected had happened. But then, Fraser was silent, as Sam turned his wand on Fraser, his face a mask of horror. Looks like he's trying to get his wand free from his hand. Several wizards were out of their seat now. Minerva McGonagall had got up, and was making her way down the steps of the Gryffindor student stand and onto the pitch. Rufus. Darren, half dragging, half pulling Rufus Lestrange to his feet, pointed towards the action, just as Sam Potter aimed his wand, shaking, closing his eyes, towards Septimus, upsetting the boy and making him fall. At the same time, above Septimus, he saw. He's just completely totally destroyed the broom. September's lightning shot. Julian pointed towards where Septimus had just been. In its place was a dark cloud of carbon, smoke wafting around. The broom had been completely obliterated. Sam lowered his wand. Now, there were several wizards out of their seats. McGonagall was hurrying across the pitch, having frozen as Sam had exploded Septimus's broom, and shouting at him. The heads of Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were also in their feet, trying to calm their houses. Sam Potter. Severus Snape was hurrying down the steps now, in order to reprimand the school's head boy, as Crystalia Brandt, her hands over her face, was being comforted by a group of other seventh-year Gryffindors. As the wizards descended on him as Fraser Blewett retreated back quietly into the fabric of the Slytherin corner. Sam Potter. Snape called again, and then fell silent as Sam's mouth opened. The words did not sound like his voice, but they came from his mouth all the same. Conjurism ... is where true magic lies ... all magic. We call upon you, good wizards and witches, to destroy those misborn. Sam's mouth closed, his face one of fixed horror. Lily screamed. It's not Sam saying that, she cried, as the headmaster and Professors Crowfoot and Huxley Baird continued their descent on the boy, Minerva bending down to Septimus, who was still lying on the grass, whence he had fallen, picking him up, and was about to speak, when the way is thin. Join us. A vacuum of silence was created for a moment. Again, the heads of the houses stopped, looking between Sam, and then, behind them, to the Gryffindor stand. Rufus, his mother's portable pensieve in hand, was holding it out, as if it were about to explode, and wandered towards Sam Potter. The way is thin, the PP said, in the same voice as Sam had spoken moments before. Sam's face was one of horror. He waved his arm, sweeping it backwards and forwards, and it seemed as if he was trying to drop it, like someone trying to remove a piece of sellotape from their hand, and failing dismally. Conjurists, arise. Again the voice appeared to be coming from the portable pensieve of Bellatrix. Rufus dropped the offending object, staring down at it, accusingly. Conjurists, spat Sirius, glaring at Blewett and Swales, still sitting impassively several rows in front of them. Them. Come on, Sirius, shouted Dave Mullen, as he stood on his seat. We need you for. There was an explosion, like a shattering of glass. All of the glass in the windows of the school were shattering all around them, the panes exploding like the lightning shot had done just now. There was chaos. People were screaming, trying to climb over the seating, some frozen, some with their heads in their hands. Sam Potter was still standing still, his wand aloft, as Minerva had scooped up Septimus, with the help of Jason Cruglington, carrying him back to the Gryffindor section. Conjurists. The words continued through the pensieve. The way is thin. Sam had managed to shake free his wand, and was now sitting on the grass, his head in his hands. As the teachers who were not with the students, as the reciprocators, as the errors who were not calming parents, got onto their seats, they held their wands aloft, as the pensieve continued to broadcast the same words. Above them, on his broad-clad, Severus Snape swooped and dived, like a spider spinning a web, a defense, of the children and adults below, using the wands of the defending wizards as the nodes around which the fibers were spread. Soon, as the arena was filled with threads, these closed up about each other, fixing a protective shield around the Quidditch pitch and its people below. "Conjurists!" screamed Sirius, but neither Bluewit nor Swales had moved from their seats. "Conjurists!" imitated the pensieve. "Destroy those misborn." As Severus Snape completed his shield spell, he axioed the portable pensieve, encasing it in a similar spell, silencing its poisonous broadcast. "These people are defended," he boomed as he stepped into the arena, while outside the shield long shadows formed. 88,888,888. "I've put him into the back room." Hermione, who had arrived back to their home just before 9, was waiting for Harry on the doorstep. He had spent all afternoon decorating and catering for the copious amount of guests that they were expecting that evening. Harry knew that telling Mum the reason would cement a lot more waverers who might just linger at the castle with the students and then choose not to come, something he had gambled upon. He had been called in an emergency to the ministry shortly after 7, an hour before he was expecting Hermione back, but had found no one. Nothing at the ministry seemed right, and no one of the small evening staff knew who had or indeed why he might have been summoned. Harry had left a short note to Hermione in case she returned before he did, and that seemed to be what had happened as she stood in the doorway lingering half in, half out of the doorway. "Who's that?" Harry couldn't begin to work out who Hermione was talking about. His head was beginning to go a little light in the darkness of the penultimate day of October, the evening dull and cold, and his apparition back home being slightly more disorientating than usual, possibly because of the effort he had gone to for the party, including cleaning the house out from top to bottom, disposing of the old furniture that their parents had given to them when they were first getting together, and generally making the joint announcements of both Hermione's promotion and their wedding date of 30th April happen in a more hospitable environment. "Who?" "Your friend, that's who." "Ron?" "Yes, Ron. And he's guest." Hermione stood aside and let Harry step past her. Why was she so hostile? She must have got his note. Must have understood why he had to call back to work, given the nature of the message. "I'm just grateful that your cousin is at work and couldn't come this evening," Hermione concluded, following him in and closing the door behind them. Harry, still puzzled by what she was saying, strode down the hall and opened the glass-plated living room door. "You've done wonders with the place, mate." Ron, sitting on the settee, got to his feet. "Thanks for inviting us," he added, shaking Harry's hand. Harry looked to Ron, and then to the figure on the seat. "Hello, Harry," said Freya, looking up to Harry. Harry, the jigsaw clicking into place, looked over his shoulder to Hermione, who was standing in the doorway, her arms folded, then looked sharply back at his friend. "I know she's young, but you know when things are right." Ron leaned towards Harry and whispered into his ear. But before Harry could reply, the living room windows shattered. Hermione and Freya screamed. Harry, who had been standing near the door, yelled, pushing Ron to the floor as shards of glass flew towards them, a sound, like a voice, low, loud and booming, trespassing on their party. Old magic. True magic. Destroy ethos misborn. The way is thin. Join use. The way is thin? Hermione whispered to Harry as she too had thrown herself to the floor, and had crawled towards him. Join who? As if in answer, another word came. Conjurists. Conjurists? What do they want? Harry huffed from the floor. Destroy ethos mispan.